Welcome to the Mind Solution podcast with Sarah Maud. The Mind Solution podcast is for leaders like you who are passionate about well-being in the workplace because you understand that a strong, resilient and happy workforce is the key to your organisation's success. The Mind Solution podcast is here to help you. So join us every week where we'll share with you powerful insights, strategies and know-how to ensure that your people and your organisation are truly thriving from the inside out. Hello and welcome, Sarah Maud here. And I'm here today to talk about the concept of this 4-day working week that we've been hearing about. Now, I'm sure that for many of you listening in right now, the idea of a 4-day working week is beyond heavenly. The idea that you get 3 full days to yourself to enjoy your time, to do things at a more leisurely pace, instead of what can sometimes feel like the reality of trying to squash and cram everything into the weekend. And often by the time that you've done the housework, you've been to the supermarket, you've done the washing, the ironing, you've dropped the kids at football, you've watched the kids play football, you've maybe caught up with friends, family, you get to the end of Sunday and it's like, oh, where did that go? And you're setting your alarm ready for another Monday morning, maybe not feeling as rejuvenated as you'd like to feel. So I am absolutely 100% behind the 4-day working week. In fact, I'd actually really love to know, when did we decide that we needed to work 5 days a week? You know, who was the individual that made that decision in the first place? I'd quite like to have a chat with them and understand their logic behind that. So we have 30 organisations primed to trial the 4-day working week in the UK this year. And the organisations vary in size from 20 employees up to 200 employees. And they're going to reduce their working hours to 32 hours a week. Now, all of that in theory sounds amazing. And to be fair, there have been studies done in Iceland where after a 5-year study has been a huge success. And there's been a real correlation in this 5-year study between shorter working hours and increased productivity and health and well-being. And I can totally understand that. As somebody that works in the field of health and well-being, I can understand that if we do have shorter working hours, then we are going to benefit. It's like a bit of a no-brainer. But what I'm really curious about is, are we actually going to work shorter hours? Are we actually going to stick to 32 hours a week? Because the reality is that, especially in the UK, there's already a culture of long working hours. We already have people that are trying to take their work and put it into 5 days, let alone into 4 days. We've got often managers and leaders that are working at the weekend, that are checking their emails, that are working very early on a morning and late into the night. You know, many of them working 50, 60 hours a week. So when it comes to reducing the working hours to 32 hours in 4 days, then my sense is that that can work if an organisation's culture is already in line with people working in that way and not working excessively long hours. Because where we've got people that are trying to deliver in their job role and they're struggling to do that in 5 days, just cutting something down to a 4-day week is not going to make them more productive, is not going to make them more engaged. And this whole 4-day working week is being done for two very significant reasons. One is to try and resolve the whole big pandemic of burnout, and the other is around the Great Resignation. But if people are already burnt out working a 5-day working week, if we don't fundamentally change the culture of an organisation, then a 4-day week isn't the answer. In fact, it has the risk of creating more problems than there are now. Now, looking particularly at the UK, and we can look at certain industries and certain professions, and let's look at something like the property, housing and estates industry. They work an average of 49 hours a week. We look at the leisure industry and sports managers, they work an average of 52 hours a week. We look at something like the trades industry, vehicle body builders and repairers, they're 53 hours on average a week. Restaurants, catering establishments, managers of those are working on average 55 hours a week. So we're already working excessively long hours. So where's that work going to go if we try and reduce it to 32 hours? I mean, it's going to be different in different jobs. You take something like bus and coach drivers. They work an average of 42 hours, but they're working to a specific shift. But for those that aren't working to specific shifts like that, where's that extra work going to go? And what are we going to do in organisations to really facilitate a change in how we're working? Because I've seen some organisations who they've implemented initiatives such as No Meetings Friday. Does that mean that they'd never have any meetings on a Friday? No. I've had so many organisations that say, it's our No Meetings Friday, but actually we've got no space in the rest of the week, so we're happy to meet with you on a Friday. If we're going to create a 4-day working week, we have to have the right infrastructure and systems and culture to support that. And we need to make sure that the people at the top are role modelling that. Because I hear countless stories, especially in certain industries, where the chief execs are working around the clock. I have one organisation that shared with me recently that their chief exec is a workaholic. She's online at 7 a.m, she's still online at 10 p.m. And it's her belief that anything less than that is a weakness. Probably also one of the reasons that they've had a number of people walk out of their organisation recently. So we need to make sure that our leadership team are role modelling that. And the question is, are they role modelling a better way of working even now at a 5-day working week? The whole issue around burnout was there before the pandemic. It's not a new concept. And sometimes we have these ideas that we think, if we just work shorter hours, that's going to resolve everything. But like anything that we're trying to implement, if the culture doesn't support it, then it will be set up to fail. I mean, certainly some of our key observations at the beginning of the pandemic were managers who were working round the clock. They were using their commuting time to work. You know, it was that sense of, oh, I'll just do another half an hour. I'll just do another hour. There was also a high amount of guilt that if they stepped away from their laptop, that they worried that people would think they were skiving. They thought that if they went for a walk, that, people are going to think that they're not really working. And maybe that's also born from the fact that if we cast our mind back to working from home requests, you remember those? They would often be turned down because managers didn't believe that people could be trusted to work from home. I think we've blown that myth out the window now. And it's so interesting because when you talk to managers and you try and understand their world and why they think that just stepping out away from their desk, away from their laptop means that they're not working, that they're not reliable. Because actually, if we were in an office, you'd leave the office to go get something from lunch. You'd leave the office to go and maybe walk around the park on your lunch break. But something happened during the pandemic. And it was like people had to prove that they were trustworthy. They were trying to prove that they were actually working. But they were working possibly even more whilst having to juggle children and homeschooling and any number of things. So is it any surprise that we've had a massive, massive burnout? And organisations are doing a lot more, way, way more around health and well-being than they've ever done in the history of time. But we still have got high rates of mental health problems. We've still got really high rates of burnout, fatigue, adrenal fatigue, health problems. And that was pre the pandemic. So reducing it suddenly down to 4 days, unless an organisation really does have the right culture in place, then it is going to raise the question of what impact would this have. But we will have to wait with bated breath to see the outcome of these studies.